Hello there everybody and welcome to the Abyss. Today we are going to be talking about Overwatch 2, and the recent PvP livestream. Now, I have a lot of notes. I have to kind of bring them up. Give me a second. I decided kind of last minute that I wanted to do this. And I wanted to pull up a lot of the AMA tweets, and I wanted to kind of get my thoughts in order and kind of just put that there as a second opinion. Now, I guess I should kind of clarify before we get started what my position is, to kind of clear the room and get everyone who doesn't or isn't open-minded about this. I think 5v5 can be good. That's my opinion. Do I think they're going about it in the right way? Absolutely not. Let me get my music back up before we get into this. There we go. So, now that I've said that, kind of got that out there, I don't think 5v5 will be good. I think it can be good. I don't think it will be good. Here's the main reason why. In order for 5v5 to be very, very good for the Overwatch community and for everything else, I don't think that... I believe the development team needs to be drastic in the way that they change the game. Because they've already basically stated, hey, we're changing the fundamentals of the game. You're no longer going to be doing a 6v6 team-based, synergy-based kind of actual tanks and coordination and strategy. We want it to shift from that, because we still want that, but we want to shift more towards a brawl. We want this to be more of a deathmatchy kind of thing without as much clutter, for lack of a better word. Because if we just go ahead and we start up a new sheet, and yes, I'm going to open up a Word doc. I do use some disgusting visuals, just because I don't know if I have color sensitivity or light sensitivity or whatever it's called. But I use a black theme. Let's see here. Window capture. Add. New. Word doc. But I'm also going to be just kind of going one by one through the AMA points, kind of bringing up their own tweets and talking about my opinion on each of those. Where are you, Word? Word. Here we go. Shrink this down a little bit. Let me know if this is too small, or if you can't read it or something. Stop the auto, thank you. Alright, transition this over. So let's go ahead and make a pro con list of 5v5. If I can type, which I cannot. Alright, so let's just start with the pros to showcase why I think that 5v5 can be good. Well, there's the obvious. Q times will be faster for every roll. And the reason for that is, let me go ahead also. I hate how the default's that. But the reason is because tanks are the most in demand. Tanks are the most in demand role because no one wants to play tank. Now, instead of addressing why no one wants to play tank, they've decided, they being the Overwatch dev team, have decided to just make it less necessary to have a tank by removing one just completely. I don't think that's the best option, but we'll get into that in a second. Because this is a pro of 5v5. Whether you like it or not, whether, you know, it's what you idealize as what should happen, you know, it's gonna be true. That's just the case. So we're gonna list this as the first major pro you get from 5v5. Let's go ahead and list 1. Now, list 2 is there's going to be less visual clutter on the screen at any given time, or on any given, in any given fight, we'll say. All right? So that is indeed a good plus, simply because it'll be easier for spectators. So let's go ahead and tab this. Makes it easier for spectators to watch. So Overwatch League, fan base. It makes it technically easier to play. So what this will do, in my opinion at least, is it's going to lower the skill floor of the average player at the same time as lowering the skill ceiling, because one of the ways to get higher in rank, one of the skill sets, is being able to decipher all of the information being given to you from 6 players versus 6 players. That's why you see, in my opinion, a lot of the lower tier players going, I'm okay with this. I don't really care. I get, you know, less idiots on my team. Another pro we'll talk about, and less chances to kind of screw up, and more ability to take duels, or, you know, just kind of yeet myself in there because that's what they want me to do. You know, kind of no brain, kind of no thinking about synergies, about, you know, what type of tank I need to play with, no type of worrying about constant shield battles, double shield battles, shield break wars, or anything like that. None of that has to be a worry anymore. And the lower tier you are, the greater news that is, because that's the complicated part. Now, whether it's good or bad, I think it's great for the casual player base. And I think it's horrible for the competitive player base as the game stands now. So I'm going to actually list this as a pro and as a con. We will come back to this thought in a second, though. So going back to this, another pro of this is there's less likely to have idiots on team. And what do I mean by this? Why did I put idiots in quotes? Simple. I want to put a perspective note. Idiots is indeed a subjective term. However, we've all blamed or had that one guy on our team before. So even if they weren't complete idiots, we all know what we're talking about. That one Reinhardt who says that he's not getting enough healing when he's being pocketed by a Baptiste and an Ana, and gets nano boost every single fight because the Ana charges nano boost purely by healing him, because he pushes shift, he pushes W, and he pushes left click. That's it. And then he wonders why he's dying. That kind of idiot has happened to us all at some point, especially if you're in the lower tiers. That's not going to really happen anymore. However, I mean, okay, let me rephrase. It will happen. It will still happen. The downside, it's less likely to happen since there's one less tank. The downside is when it does happen, as Flats has pointed out before, Flats _ Overwatch, he's pointed out, yeah, now it's going to be so much worse. Because before, when the Reinhardt went and did that stupid stuff, you are left kind of, right now you have an off tank who can kind of fill the tank role, but it's still a challenge. When it's 5v5, you just won't have a tank. Now, at the same time, I think if you have one tank who's being dumb, and it becomes a one tank, 2 DPS, 2 support situation versus a 2 tank, 2 DPS, 2 support situation, I view that as a worse scenario than if you were to have 2 DPS and 2 supports against 1 tank, 2 DPS, and 2 supports. That might just be me being a plat boy who hasn't been higher than Diamond, and hasn't experienced what it's like to be in a high SR environment when you are down 1 tank, or if you're down both tanks and they're down 1 tank, that specific scenario. I think that it's going to be ultimately a negative trade-off in the 5v5 what's the right word? In the 5v5 era, because let's be fair here, they're not going to change this. They're going to put it in and basically say deal with it. Like, that's just what it's going to be. And the sooner people kind of come to terms with it, the sooner, because it's either one or two things are going to happen. One, there's going to be such a massive pushback where the old players are all going to just quit in mass as soon as Overwatch 2 comes out, and the Overwatch League scene is going to be put in peril and in jeopardy because, as we'll get into later, all of the off tanks, or maybe all of the main tanks, are basically going to be kicked from the team, because right now as it stands, the 6v6 standard, we've already got 20 teams on a $20+ million team, essentially. So the teams aren't going to go away, and there's already 20 of them with 6 people on there on the first roster. They're going to have to not start at the very least someone. So one of them is going on the bench. And so whoever they have on the bench right now, if they have someone, is almost definitely going to be kicked. And potentially the guy they have on their live roster might not be needed anymore. Now, I have heard of Custa's argument, which I do think has some validity to it, where it was, you think one tank player is going to be told, learn every tank that plays differently? That's like saying, hey, yeah, just learn every support. That way, no matter who we have in as your partner, you can either switch between main and off support. It's not that hard. It's not that different. And could you do it? Maybe, but you definitely wouldn't be the highest caliber of your peers, right? Like, there's going to be main supports who only do main supporting that are going to be better than you. Just like if you take a Genji Pharah player and tell him, oh, just learn some hit scan, like, you're just not going to. Like, that's one of my complaints with, like, BQB, for example, on the Florida Mayhem, which I am a big fan of. He's very hit or miss, and I feel like it's because he's split between playing heroes like Sombra and I want to say not Tracer, but like tracky soldier kind of heroes, and also playing Mccree, Ashe, and Widowmaker. Like, it's a bit hard to be like, just master the different styles of aim for all these different heroes. And then be expected to play at the Overwatch League level, which is why sometimes he pops off and sometimes he doesn't. And that's why he's paired with Yaki, who more than makes up for it. So, anyway, going back to this, the pros versus cons sheet, there being one less chance for you having that idiot on your team makes the overall experience potentially greater. At the same time, I will recognize, also Flats brought this up, when there is that idiot, which we'll go ahead, well, I'll put this down here for a reminder for later. When there is that idiot, it will be worse. And oh no, I didn't put a period. That's something that I feel personally is subjective and won't be true until we get our hands on it, really. I do feel there's a substantial amount of evidence backing that up. I mean, the only evidence that I have, my own experience, is, let's say a Reinhardt charges the other Reinhardt off the field. In those specific scenarios, we get a glimpse of what 5v5 is like. And in all of those scenarios, first off, it's utter pandemonium, at least in Platinum, because everyone's like, there's no shield to hide behind. What do? I actually have to use movement to not get hit and be able to aim while dodging? What? I have to use natural cover in order to not be killed by the enemy? Which, also keep in mind, I have to pray that my supports, if I do get hit, are aware enough to stop DPSing for 2 seconds in order to heal me, which is indeed a problem at the lower ranks. But I think it's a situation where, in order to be good at support, it's like you have to be good at DPS and at the same time be good at multitasking and switch between your healing personality and your DPS personality. And healing has to come first, but if you only do healing, well, then you never get, that extra chip damage helps your DPS quite a bit, especially at higher tiers, and oftentimes can make the difference between winning a fight and losing a fight. That's nitpicking, and you just have to kind of expect not to, at least in my opinion. It's the same way, like, you have to just focus on yourself and improving yourself, and that's the only way you get better. But this is coming from the guy who's hard stuck plat, so take it with a grain of salt. Anyway, back to the pros and cons sheet. In 5v5, let me also add another thing, because this is going to be the ultimate category in my eyes. Oops. And what do I mean by purgatory? What I mean by purgatory is, this is things that's going to be I misspelled it. You saw nothing. This is things that will be pros. It's 9:30, my dudes. It will be pros if done correctly. In my eyes, you will have homogeneous tanks. And what that means is you're there, as they put in their own words, solidifying what it means to be a tank. Because right now, what does it mean to be a tank? Well, it depends upon what tank you are. It's not like support, where main support and off support essentially have the same role, heal your teammates, where their only distinction is their utility versus their quantity of heals. So in the case of like Zenyatta, Lucio, their utility comes from speed boost, discord, and ult denial, along with various other things such as extra damage, whereas Mercy and Moira are much more... I mean, Mercy has her utility of damage boost, which is a really good utility if utilized correctly, as along with her resurrect ability, which... we'll get more into why I think Resurrect is a bigger problem than that the devs just refuse to talk about. But that'll be for a little bit later. And Moira, who's just heals and damage. That's it, right? There's really nothing more to her kit. Her orb does damage or does healing. Her fade is an escape mechanism. Her right click damages, her left click heals, and her ult heals and damages. So like that's really like she comes down to just focusing on heals and your positioning and quick ult charge generation to be able to put out a lot of heals and deal some extra damages through a lot of barriers. Ana is much more of the healing, same thing with Baptiste, but they're a mixture of utility. They're not as utility dependent as Lucio and Zen, but they have utility that can be used to defend themselves, such as Immortality, Anti-Nade, which just prevents healing, which is still very broken in my opinion, and Sleep Dart for a stun. But aside from that, they do damage, and they deal healing, and a lot of it. And then of course there's Brig, but she's in a totally different category because she does a little bit of everything, but she's not like... she does AoE heals, direct heals, she prevents dives by booping them away, as well as she has a stun and a shield, and she can give armor out. So she's a little bit different, but like overall you can basically be like, okay, so all of them heal, all of them do some damage, and it just depends upon on utility and interactions what your role does. Okay, cool. So, and same thing for DPS, you've got for the most part, it's just do a lot of damage, and then it depends upon your kit on how you do that damage. But then you look at the tank role, and the tank role is heavily divided between two categories. You've got the main tanks and you've got the off tanks, and there are some that tried to blur, like when Wrecking Ball got added to Overwatch. That was when the devs started putting their foot down, saying enough, tanks are tanks, they're not main and off, they're tanks. And I think that's where a big divide comes in the community, because even to this day Wrecking Ball is just considered annoying, and it's kind of a hard position, because after he got added, it's like, well, is he off tank for Winston? Is he like a new diva? Well, no, he's sort of just this weird disruptor tank that is more like a main tank than an off tank. He goes in, he deals damage, he disrupts them, kills the supports and the snipers, and then gets out, you know? Like, that's his role, more or less, is to go in, maybe get a pick, disrupt their team a bit, drop mines, and deny an area. That's not typical for a lot of the other tanks. If you look at Reinhardt, his ultimate is a stun, he has a shield, and he kind of big rectangle mans. He holds a position, and he's very fluid in his movement. He put shields up, put shield down, bait things out. He's a very mind game kind of tank. And if you look at like Zarya as well, she works really well with Reinhardt because she enables him to get close. Because Reinhardt can't really do anything unless he's up close and personal. So what they're trying to do is take this category of like Orisa, Winston, and Reinhardt, and at the same time take the other category of like Diva, Zarya, Roadhog, and of course Sigma. And because Sigma, in my opinion, I don't know why he doesn't get talked about more. He's just like Brig. He has a shield, he has a DM type of ability, he has a stun, he can fly during his ultimate, he stun locks enemies in the air during their ultimate, and deals as much as 500 damage to an ulting Winston. Oh, and his balls do like 120 damage. Like, and also I think he floats like Zenyatta, so I don't even know if he has footstep sounds. So you're like, how come he's not? He just does a little bit of everything. Now he's often considered an off tank because of the Sigma Orisa meta, but he's also been used both as an off tank with Reinhardt and as main tank with Diva and with Zarya in the past. Back when his shield was basically put out, bring down, pull out, bring down. So he's a bit weird as well, but he's like in the Brig zone. Like, he's weird for a different reason. Any day of the week he would be considered a main tank purely because he has a shield, but he also can act as an off tank. And I think that was sort of like, that was the beginning of their issues, that I feel like they decided we're just going to try to homogenize them all instead of going down this path that we've already kind of laid the groundwork for like 3+ years. We're going to just make all tanks tank. We are bruisers, more or less, for lack of a better word. So that is indeed like, I don't know. I feel like I don't necessarily like it, but at the same time, I don't dislike it. I'm kind of just neutral. I'm like, okay, if that's your decision, whatever, go for it. Do I think it's going to hurt the higher levels of play? Yes, and the reason I have for that is the higher levels of play is built upon diversity of tactics, quick reaction times, and understanding of a bunch of interactions. There's several other factors as well, such as teamwork, communication, and understanding of basically the entire lobby, and knowing what you can get away with and what you can't. And that falls more into the teamwork category. And what makes this really kind of work, in my opinion, is that tank synergy. The tanks drive everything, but no one wants them to be good. Because here's the thing. If the tanks are good, and this is something that I'm taking basically out of the words of Flats, it may not be exactly 1-for-1 because my memory is what it is. So take it with a grain of salt. But tank synergies, tanks in general, drive a lot of team fights, and when tanks are too good, every single team fight is going to be decided by the tanks. If tanks are not good, well, the tanks are doing nothing. They're kind of just ult batteries that are holding positions. They don't do anything, and so the tanks are just not having any fun. They're not going to have any impact, and they more or less might as well not be there. So how do you kind of fix that? And their solution is, well, if we have less tanks, and this is my interpretation of their solution. If we have less tanks to worry about, then we can balance it easier, right? We can make the balance better, and that's the key. And so I'm going to go ahead and just take a second and explain my entire position in this one phrase. Overwatch 2 PvP can be great if the Overwatch devs balance this game correctly. This is the reason, in my opinion, everyone is freaking out. And there's this big divide between factions, more or less, of the Overwatch community. Because there's a lot of people being super hopeful and super, optimistic about, yeah, I can see how it will be easier to... I'm sorry, I keep hitting the microphone. It'll be easier to balance Overwatch 2 if there's less heroes in any given match to worry about, and less dynamics and less synergies to worry about. However, they don't have a good record of balancing the game in the community's eyes. And that's where the divide becomes. That's why people who are pessimistic about this game, going to 5v5, don't think that the Overwatch devs are going to make it better. They're only going to make it worse. I think I summarized that fairly well. That is just the truth. If you look at Brig coming out, if you look at Sigma coming out, if you look at Doomfist, and you look at Widow, they've done a horrible job balancing those specific heroes because, as they put it in their own words, everything affects something else. And this comes from, in my opinion, their need to make everything unique. Need to have every single ability have a unique interaction with every other ability. Why does DM delete all projectiles but not rock? It's a projectile, but it's a special projectile. Why does EMP delete shields? And for a while, again, this is something they did correct, but for a while, if Sigma put out a shield and you hacked him, his shield didn't go away. But if you hacked Reinhardt, his shield does go away. But if you hack Orisa, her shield doesn't go down. Also, if you hack Orisa, she can't use her Fortify, which stops all CC coming to her. But it doesn't stop... or if she gets hacked, she can't use it. But if she already used it before getting hacked, she's still going to keep it. There's all these unique niche interactions that make the game more complicated than it needs to be and makes balancing a nightmare. Why do, bubbles, they cleanse things, but they don't cleanse hack. They cleanse anti-nade, they cleanse freeze, they cleanse slowing, and they do prevent damage. However, and they also can block shatter, and shatter can be blocked by some things and can't be blocked by other things. This is like the core reason why Overwatch, in my opinion, is super hard to balance, is because they've made it hard to balance. And that stems, in my opinion, from them, being the Overwatch devs, balancing around making a hero fun to play over making them fun to play against. They want both, but it's an inverse relationship for the most part. The more you make a hero fun to play, the less he's fun to play against. The more Mei is fun to play, the less everyone likes playing against a Mei. The more Echo is fun to play, the less fun to play it is against an Echo. The more fun to play Doomfist and Widowmaker and Hanzo and anyone else who can one-shot like a Roadhog is, the less fun to play it is against them. So, let's go back to this pros and cons sheet. So we've got queue times being faster for every single role. We've got less visual clutter on any given fight. We've got less likely to have idiots on our team. What other things can we do? Put on here. Easier to balance, we talked about. We're going to say more... Well, actually, I'll put this down here. More of a standardized way of playing tanks. And what I mean by this is basically you're going to be doing either damage or trying to take space by yourself. And I think the Overwatch devs put too much faith in supports, because essentially what they've done is they've made a more duelist favored environment. But the thing about high level duels is every bit of HP matters. So now the supports are going to be split between focusing on their only tank, who's going to take all of the focus, and healing any poke damage that their DPS and other support are taking. You're going to be making the support's lives hell. You're going to be making the DPS lives hell. And most importantly, you're going to be making the tank life hell. But we'll get into that with the cons. So it is going to be technically easier to balance because there's less heroes to balance. It will increase... it will increase the... How do I want to phrase this? It will increase their opportunities when creating a tank. I want to say that's how I want to phrase it. Basically, what I'm trying to say here, opportune, whatever. I can't spell. I don't spell, I do math. There we go. This will increase opportunities when creating tank. What I mean by that, tank heroes. And what I mean by that is the fact that they will have more options available to them now that it's a standardized role, other than, because right now when they make a tank, they have to worry about a lot of things. It's sort of like a healer. Back before role passives, they had to almost always include some way for them to heal themselves. Otherwise, it would be almost impossible to duel. That's the reason why Baptiste has his regenerative burst. Why Zen has his shields, which will heal over time. Lucio can heal himself with his own healing. Mercy has passive regen. Ana has her nade. Moira heals the more she does damage. And Briggs Inspire heals herself as well. All of these are just ways for the healers to heal themselves. Now, when we're talking about balance changes, this is the same thing with, tanks. They always had to have maybe, they don't necessarily have to have some form of movement, but they have to have some survivability, right? Roadhog was his E. Winston Diva Wrecking Ball is their movement. Reinhardt is technically his charge and his shield. Orisa is her fortify. Sigma is his sucky suck. Zari is her bubble. They all have some way to survive. That is what they have to keep in mind with their role. And I won't be as true for this, but again, the issue I have, it's supposed to be heroes, is I feel like this one is because of 5v5, and more so because of homogeneous tanks, because we're making tanks essentially the same across the board and giving them buffs, or rather all trying to do the same thing. That's going to make it easier to make new ones, because before they have to worry about, well, are we stepping on another hero's toes, which is another complaint of mine, having to always worry about that. I feel like this is sort of saying we don't need to worry about that. We also don't need to worry about tank synergies, so we can just make whatever we want that will be good by itself and not worry about, well, will this ultimate ability be OP if it's also comboed with Grav or Shatter or Flux? Like, we don't have to worry about that anymore. That's a good thing from a balance perspective. It's also a terrible thing from a gameplay perspective because, again, that's part of what kind of made tanks fun. Was being able to do some form of playmaking. I'm making a note to talk about something later. However, that is something they will have a better time doing. Same thing with supports. However, I'm not going to put it on here because that's not a 5v5. That's a pro-con thing of role passives, which I am all in for. Let's see. What other things can we think of that is a pro for 5v5? Map design will be easier. Or should be easier. Considering now they don't have to worry about fitting 6 or 12 total players on the field with things getting crowded. They can make semi-smaller maps if need be. They can make chokes that are, you know, like they don't have to worry about as many CC ability combos coming through. Right? Especially if we go take them at their face value and say that they're going to be reworking some heroes. But that is what it is. Well, for now, let's go ahead and leave that as it is, right? And because I think there are still more, but I want to start getting into the cons. And the cons is, first and foremost, tank synergies being removed. And that is absolutely a con. There's no one who can argue that that's a good thing. I suppose you could try to say that it's a good thing for lower level players as it makes them need to know less. Easier to pick up Overwatch. And so from high level play. So lower skill ceiling, lower skill floor. And that's what I will say about that, because that, to me, that's what it really comes down to, is there's a lower skill ceiling now. That's what a lot of the high level people hate. It also means that current tank players will, how do I phrase this? Tanks will be less fun to play in current patch. Or let me just put it like this. Assuming current patch, which we know isn't going to be the case, but without knowing what specific changes they're making, I don't know. For example, the Winston change isn't enough. Winston's going to be horrible to play in a 5v5 format as things are. I'll get into how I think they could change it to make him viable with his displayed ability changes in Overwatch 2. However, as it is right now, tanks will be less fun to play. And that's the opposite of what they should be trying to do, at least in my opinion. What other cons are we going to think about? Oh yeah, let me... I mean, here's the what it boils down to, I guess. Too much damage. Like, why is this such a con? They won't... One less tank to soak block damage. I mean, I'm trying to think how I can phrase this that's different than what was already said above, which is tanks are going to be less fun to play. Like that, it comes down to need to both peel and take space simultaneously. Okay, good enough. Need to be healed by both supports, dodge burst damage, which can kill them in less than second, and allow teammates time to heal themselves and other teammates. Because let's be fair, I've already talked about this before. This idea of, oh, there's one tank, so you don't have to split your healing between the two. It's like, no, hold on. That's the whole reason why you were able to heal and switch between the two, was because they divvied up that damage. If there's only one tank, like, yeah, you remove some damage because there's no off tank, but they're not the ones who deal the most damage. The ones who deal the most damage is honestly the DPS and the supports. And you're going to make it so one tank has to kind of soak up all of that damage. At the same time, as I talked about before, duelist... Oh yeah, I'm going to put it under this. Duelist format means healing needs to go to playmakers. So what does that mean? What does that mean? That means that either the tank needs to be the playmaker and just be like a mega mini boss running around, or the healing needs to go to the DPS, and the DPS just needs to hit their shots, which is going to make modes like, oh, I don't know, defense that much more stressful. It's, imagine playing Widowmaker on defense, but that's just going to be every hero now. The second you die, the game's just, the fight's over. That's it. There's no recovering. There's no using that as a springboard to turn the tides. It's a 4v5. And even more so if it's the tank. So this just means that either tanks are OP or tanks do nothing, feed ult. But even then, not really even feed ult. Because, again, the issue with this isn't the fact that they're improving the chances of the other team. Oh, that's another thing. Let's add that to... Sorry, I'm going to go back to this real quick. Less ult generation. I butchered that. So there will be less ult generation in 5v5. However, the issue here with tanks isn't whether or not they're going to be feeding ult anymore. The issue is they're not going to feel good to play. They're going to either be making everyone else not have a good time, or they're not going to have a good time. Because you're going to take this slow, beefy character and say, do damage. Like, that's not the point of a tank. That's not, at least not in the current Overwatch. It's a lot more nuanced than that. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's just plat thinking. And maybe they're trying to change that. Maybe they're trying to say, hey, we see games like Valorant and R6 and other shooter games, hero shooters, like Apex, I guess. And part of the reason why they're successful is, well, one, they all have like 5v5 format, I think. Does R6 have 5v5? I think he does, yeah. And then Valorant does. And then if you look at any like League of Legends or Heroes of the Storm, it's all 5v5, I'm pretty sure. So what? They're just going to take a page out of their book and try to make it more viewer friendly for that? That's the only thing I can kind of think that is similar. They're moving toward a duelist format. Like, that's what 5v5 will do, at least in current patch. And the counter argument is, .5v5 may just not be needed. A lot of the issues that we talk about that are going to be solved by this, aside from, like, I try to focus on things that would make it, you know, that it can't just be solved by current things, such as clutter and idiots being on your team. But easier to balance doesn't mean it's not currently impossible to balance. And queue times being faster just make tanks fun. Make tanks, you know, better. Or, conversely, make DPS and supports worse to play. Well, we don't want anyone to feel worse playing it. You misunderstand. If you make it so Soldier and Tracer can't, you know, have to actually aim like they do now, well, they're going to be naturally played less than Widowmaker, Hanzo, Doomfist, and Ashe, 3 of which can one-shot delete a person from the game, especially when you have abilities like Resurrect, which makes a 6v6 or 6v5 fight back into a 6v6 fight, or make a 5v5 fight where a guy gave up his life to kill a key member of the enemy team, but did it in a dangerous position, turn into a 5v6 purely because he outskilled that guy, outskilled quote-unquote, by punching directly into their team and killing them, and then the Mercy just goes, nope, that's it, they're back. Meanwhile, Soldier's like, well, I couldn't even kill them in the first place, because at least he, you know, with his life, took out one of their cooldowns, so now they no longer have Resurrect for the next, like, 30 seconds. That level of play, and not even that, if he manages to, like for Doomfist, he manages to seismic slam some dude, and gets like 3 people, he gets enough health to basically become a mini tank, and then he just, you know, yeets himself out of there. That's frustrating to play against. And that's something that they will never look at. Wrecking Ball leaving, you know, on 20 HP after getting 1100 HP, soaking up more than a Winston from a Winston who's ulting from a simple cooldown. That's frustrating. Peeking around a corner for a split second and getting your head torn off by a random Hanzo Sonic arrow, or a Widowmaker who had her ult up like the second you peeked, and your just reaction time isn't fast enough to go, oh shoot, the ult's up. Or maybe you didn't hear the ult because the ult call out got bugged. Has happened before. All of those are unfun to play against, but the only way to kind of, you know, and on top of that, to play them, right? It's so much better to have that than some guy who's putting in consistent damage, but the consistent damage is constantly being healed up by a crap ton of heals. If they nerf healing and they nerf damage, less ult generation will naturally come. Less ult generation comes if there's just less damage being put out, and you can also buff how much it takes to do ult generation. This is the same kind of thing in my mind with the role queue. For me, I was against role queue for one core reason. It defeats one of the greatest benefits Overwatch had. What is unique about Overwatch? One of the greatest unique things that I think people take for granted nowadays is your ability to switch between heroes mid-fight. Something isn't working, well then you can change to a new hero. Yeah, you lose your ult, but you may be able to gain an advantage by getting a pick-off with a Doomfist punch. Or getting a pick-off with a Widowmaker headshot or a Hanzo headshot. Or maybe they're just running something like a ball Doomfist and switching to Sombra just happens to be the choice. Those are the kinds of plays that can't really happen in any other game. Valorant, you can't choose a new hero midway through. Heroes of the Storm, you can't. Any MOBA, you really can't. Not even Paladins, you can do that. Like, Overwatch is, I think, if it's not the only one, it is one of the very few that allows you to switch between heroes midway through like the game. And then role queue comes in and says, by the way, no, you can't do that. You're limited to this amount of heroes. And since they had already combined attackers and defenders, well, now the DPS, not only being the most popular because it's the most fun and rewarding role, it also has the most amount of heroes. So the most amount of one tricks also pile in there. And then you have a role like tank and support, where at least support's semi-fun to play because you deal damage on top of healing. And like tanks, it's more about positioning, mind games, taking space, and praying your DPS can hit their shots. How is that fun? How is that rewarding? And I think that's what they went, all right, let's just change the tanks to be more fun and rewarding. And it's like, oh, okay, so you're basically making them weaker, beefier DPS, aka bruisers. What? This is the type of things that, again, it goes back to the confidence level. Overwatch 2 could be really great. The reason why people don't think it will be is because historically they've shown they're not doing the right things in the community's eyes to make it better. They're, in some cases, it feels like actively doing the opposite. So, going back to this list, I know I keep jumping overall to different places. Most pros can be done with quote-unquote proper balancing. And I think the reason they don't do this, the counterpoint to this sub, is going back to the ideology of the dev team. And the dev team isn't treating this as a competitive game, or hasn't in the past. They've treated it, and what I mean by that, let me clarify that before it gets clipped and taken out of context. They've treated this game as we need to balance for the bronze and the top 500 player. And they've always said that. They want the casual player base to be there. They want it to be the forefront. They want them to feel like this is a good game to play. A good game feels good to play. At the same time, a competitive game balances for the top. And they just say, if you want to get good, we're balancing for what the top players do. See what they're doing and do it. Get better at your reaction time. Get better at your flicks. Get better at XYZ that makes the main tank do well. And makes this main support do well. If you can do that, then you'll increase in rank naturally. Just improve yourself, and you'll improve, your teams are going to probably still be 50-50, but it'll be, what's the rule? The 30-30-40, 30% of the games you will lose, 30% of the games you'll win, 40% actually matter. And if you can make it so that you're winning 60-70% of your games, you'll rise in rank relatively quickly. So, if they stopped balancing for platinums and stopped balancing for, lower tier metal rank players, and they simply looked at what top 500 players were doing, and only the top 500 players, then competitively, this game would be much easier to balance. They would change heroes like Bastion, Symmetra, Sombra, probably even Reaper to some degree. Like, they would change Soldier in a heartbeat. Like, they would change heroes. They would probably change Hog as well. I would say Junkrat, maybe. I don't know exactly. I feel like he's still relatively niche. And it's fine to have niche heroes. But anyway, I'm going off on too much of a tangent, I think. I think it comes down to the idea of balancing. Because to be fair to them being the Overwatch devs, balancing is relatively subjective. Top 500 players are always going to be relatively the same in terms of there's 500 of them, right? The hard part is, like, if I'm a Brig player, I want Brig to be good. If I'm a Widow player, I want Widow to be good. If I'm a Winston player, well, I want Winston to be good. It's subjective when it comes to the community. And I do think there's an objective standard. They just worry too much about every single hero. Well, actually, I take that back, because if they did, Bastion wouldn't be standing still while in Sentry mode since the launch of Overwatch. So, I don't know. I feel like this is the big divide between factions in the Overwatch community right now. Is the people who are hopeful think that the dev team can balance it well, and believe in them, and believe that they will do it justice and make the community happy with this. As well as some of them, for example, SVB, has even stated before he's done community ones and played 5v5 modes before. And the people he played with said that it was a very fun experience. So they're hopeful. On the other side, you've got people who tank duo a lot. There's dedicated 6 stacks. Oh, yeah, that's a con. 6 stacks, Overwatch League teams, and tank duos are just screwed over. Like, there's no way, no getting around that. They're just screwed over. Purgatory, I'm going to also add duelists, win out, DPS, getting picks means more. I'll go ahead and throw that up here. Getting picks means more, simply because Mercy's going to have less opportunities to res. And the reason is because if you kill the other support and Mercy's resing it, and you have a D.Va, the D.Va now has to either be taking space or DMing that res. And so now it leaves it to the DPS to try to defend this Mercy. If it's a DPS who got picked, then maybe if you have a Brig Mercy combo, maybe you can defend the res getting off. But at the higher tiers of play, that Mercy is basically never going to be able to get the resurrect off without someone else dying. So, and because simply because of how it's going to work, even if resurrect goes off and someone else dies, or you lose a lot of HP because of it, the other team's still going to have the greater advantage because they'll have the higher health tank going in and taking space, and then you'll either, demech if it's D.Va or kill the other tank before your tank dies. And if the tank is the one who died and you try to resurrect the tank without someone making space for you, well, you should be heavily punished for that. But at the same time, if things are more duelisty, maybe because people are not going to be, death balls are going to be just, Rush is just going to be dead, more or less, because they can't, they just can't survive if there's people spread out. Take Numbani, for example. You got Soldier and Zen on one high ground. You've got, D.Va or Sigma on the other high ground with a Genji or maybe a Pharah in the sky, and then you have a Mercy with them, or you have an Ana with that Zen, and you try to death ball. You have to take the other high ground and then either try to rotate all the way around, trying to avoid them as much as possible, and it becomes a rotation game. Or you just kind of, because the only way you would be able to do it is to have a Reinhardt, because if you try to do it with any other hero, Sigma probably won't work, considering his shield will probably snap if he even still has a shield. Orissa's stationary shield is going to be just too hard without extra protection. And Zarya's bubbles just aren't going to be enough. D.Va's DM isn't going to be enough. Winston's bubble isn't going to be enough. It's just going to be burst, and you're going to have to get into a good position to kind of stick it. Which will probably burst most of your HP down before you get to put down your barrier. And Roadhog, yeah, Roadhog, I'm not going to do that. Wrecking Ball and Winston would probably be better, just because you can dive. You would have to go for a dive with a Genji and a Lucio. But even then, dive's going to be kind of weird, because you have less beefy heroes going for the dive. You have Winston Genji going in, and then a single DPS with the other two supports. So your Lucio is going to be almost necessary, because if you have a Zen Mercy going in for a dive, I don't think that's going to work. But I think it is and again, this is a pro-con sheet, right? But I feel like some of these cons are a lot more detrimental. Tanks being less fun to play, there's no way around that being just very bad. Tank Synergies being removed from high-level play is bad because it is lowering the skill ceiling, which is fairly bad. Queue times being faster for every role, that could be solved other ways. The fast pass, which also sucks. But the reason why that sucks is a completely different reason. And I'll get into that maybe some other time. Right now I'm going to focus on the Overwatch 2 stuff. Let me add a note to myself to talk about fast pass issues. And I'm not the first to bring them up. Playmaking opportunities. Why did I want to talk about that again? Playmaking opportunities. That's this dueler's format, I think. It's harder to make plays as a tank without being OP. So, what other cons can we think of? We have tank synergies being removed. Tanks will be less fun to play. Over the 5v5 chain simply not being needed to make the pros happen. 6 stacks, Overwatch 6 teams, and tank duos are just getting screwed over. The homogenized tanks, which I put down in purgatory. Duelists went out, which is great for duelists, terrible for tanks. Probably even terrible for supports. I would say objectively that's probably worse, like a con, only because more people or more roles players in any one given game is going to be worse off. So 1 tank and 2 supports are going to be worse off, whereas 2 DPS are going to be better off. So 2 out of 5 are going to be better. 3 out of 5 are going to be worse. That being said, there's more DPS players, period, because there's just simply more DPS heroes. And the more... So there's more players and there's more heroes, meaning just in general, more people will be happy with the duelists winning out. And, you know, it's not a 1-for-1 because Bastion's not really a duelist. You know, if there's less protection, Pharah's going to be in a lot harder of a position. That being said, Pharah might even be in a better position in some cases because there's no diva on their butt 24/7, because the diva is going to have to worry about the front line. So I think a con is individual fights are going to be more chaotic. Additionally, that one idiot will throw your games even harder than before. Additionally, this is something that Flats brought up before. Pressure on tank to play meta pick will be even higher. And this is something that's truer the higher level. Also, I'm going to delete this because that's what skill ceiling was before. Same thing with this. Excuse me. This is something that Flats brought up because the higher level you go, the more this matters. If you're not playing the optimized hero for the role, let's say you like playing Roadhog, but it's a Reinhardt meta. Well, right now you can be like, hey, do you play Reinhardt? Because I want to play Roadhog. Well, there's a chance you're going to have that Reinhardt play that. Or the other guy try to play Reinhardt just to be a good teammate, and you can kind of maybe do something. But if the guy plays Roadhog or Ball and only plays Roadhog or Ball, but you're screwed. And there's no one to kind of make up for that synergy if it's that much of a deficit inside the meta. Now, the idealized version of this is, and this will be in Purgatory, metas won't matter as much. Meaning, if more heroes are all basically doing the same thing, like, it doesn't matter what hero you choose. Think of it like a Valorant. It matters more if you can aim your gun than if you have, you know, the most OP ability. Or R6 doesn't matter what gadget you have. You still have to aim at the end of the day. You know, those kinds of situations, meta won't matter as much because it won't matter who you pick as long as, you know, you're up to snuff with your ability to aim and everything. This, in my opinion, however, is terrible for Overwatch, because another major upside to Overwatch that other games don't have is heroes like Mercy. Mercy or Orisa. Mercy and Orisa, like, you don't have to be that good at aiming. I guess not really for Orisa. But like Mercy, you don't have to be good at aiming. You have to be good at positional and situational awareness and understanding of who's the main target, switching between heals as the focus shifts, and getting in a good position to get up a cheeky resurrection. Those are the kinds of things, and knowing when to damage boost everyone and knowing when to heal people. These are types of things that you don't get in any other game. There's no hero in Valorant that damage boosts your team and doesn't ever have to worry about shooting. And there's no operator, like, I mean, the closest you can get in R6, I think, is shield ops. Like, yeah, but most of the times I've seen, at least, shield ops are used for either cheeky plays or when you think there's a hacker on the other team. So it's something relatively unique to Overwatch. And I'm saying that as a person who doesn't know many other, like, potential games, because maybe there's this random game that I don't know, I've never played. But for the most part, if I think of, like, the competitive scene, Counter-Strike, everyone has to aim. You know, League of Legends, it's a completely different genre. And I think this stems from them trying to be a hero shooter, right? Where they're trying to be this brawly 5v5 deathmatchy kind of thing, when that's not what Overwatch was. It's not what it is. It's a team-based game. The inherent issue with it being a team-based game is that if someone is throwing or doing something that you don't know how to compensate for, your experience is diminished. Your experience is diminished, and there's no way around it. You're just not going to have a good time in that one particular game. So I would actually almost put this as a con, because here, let me actually put this as cons. Cons is losing a bit of what made Overwatch unique. I'm going to preface this by saying one of the few games to allow 6v6 formats. Homogeny of tanks means less unique roles. But even that's subjective as well. So I'm not going to include that one. But the 6v6 format will be lost. And that is one of the things that a lot of people like. And that kind of fits more under the... Not tanks being less fun, but I guess it is fairly unique. Alright, we'll leave it at that then. And let's see another con that we can think of. And I'm trying not to be too forceful with this, because I'm not trying to make it a pro versus con. See, pros outweigh the con. I'm trying to kind of just put things in perspective. From what we've seen, I don't know. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. Kind of having a hard time thinking of something else. I know there's something else. I don't know what it is, but I know there's something else. Because ultimately, put that on a new tab. Ultimately, Overwatch, I'm in all caps, Overwatch 2 can be good if the dev team balances the heroes well for 5v5 format. they currently haven't proven in the community's eyes that they can do that for the 6v6 format. Hence the big hesitation with the 5v5 format. That's the summary of what I think is happening. I want to preface that my words, in the community's eyes. Let me go ahead and bold that. Because I also want to be very fair to these developers. They've done an amazing job and created a unique game that's a one-of-a-kind kind of treasure. And has made millions of people hooked on this Overwatch concept. This lore and this gameplay and just everything about Overwatch has made people love this game. They've also loved to hate this game because it's left them with this feeling of like it would just be so much better if they just did this X thing, this Y thing, and then eventually they do that X or Y thing, but not before 5 or 10 other things get screwed up, and they're like, well, if they just did that Z or A thing, then it'll be better. Why don't they just do that? And then eventually they do that so late that everyone who would have been retained by that fix had already left for the most part. It's this ongoing just like love-hate relationship of just listen to the community and listen to the people who, actually know things. Don't listen to the random hobo who's in silver who thinks that the issue is the fact that they keep getting crappy teammates. Like, that's not going to solve making the game feel fun. That's not going to solve making the game feel competitive. Another issue is listening too much. Listening too much to people who just don't know game design, don't know game balancing. And I feel like that's the thing. If you're going to listen to anybody, listen to the top 500 in terms of if you want to make the game more competitive. And then listen to the platinum players about what's unfun. Because if the high tier players, the high skill players, view the game as high skill ceiling and requires not a lot of luck to win, well, that's going to be similar for the lower tier, more or less. And all they'll have to, if they ever want answers on how to not be oppressed like by a Bastion or something, they just watch the higher tier players deal with them. And you never see Bastion in higher tier plays, which is also part of the reason why you never see people, play against Bastion in higher tier plays, unless you're watching Bastion main. Like, that's just a reality. Now, if you want to learn, though, why, it's horrible to play against Sombra. Why is it annoying to play against Sombra? Why is it annoying to play against Mei? Well, you've already kind of figured that one out with your Mei change. It sucks not being able to control your hero, which goes to the whole CC change. And this is the reason why I think 5v5 Overwatch 2 will be a better game than Overwatch. Because of two main things. One, lore. We're getting some. And two, these changes are going to make this game more casual. They have stated that they don't want to make this game, but they don't want to get from the competitive side of this. They want to improve, they being the developer team, by the way, that they want to improve the competitive side of this game. Well, if they want to do that, they've got to change, every hero. Which is why I think I'm hopeful, which I'm just hopeful in general. I'm always hopeful about the Overwatch game. But I'm hopeful what this means is they're finally taking a look at all the problem heroes, the problematic heroes, of yesteryear. Widowmaker, Hanzo, Ashe has already been resolved more or less. Like, imagine this. You make Ashe not one-shot people, hit scan from, 40 feet away, and, assuming she can hit her shot with the damage boost, just the very fact that she can only do 195 has made playing against her so much better. Because not only does she have to hit that one shot, she's got to hit the follow-up shot, which gives you some time to react. That's all it is. Widowmaker hooking up into the air and just killing you. Like, how are you going to react to that? You went from 200 to 0. That being said, that's going to make ultimates like Transcendence more powerful. So let's get into this second portion that I wanted to get into earlier. I don't want to dwell on this too much. I would love to talk to SVB or Flats or someone like that about this, just to get a higher tier perspective and to share with my perspective of this game and what design elements. Because the perspective I bring to this game is someone who's played in 6 stacks, someone who's played solo queue but doesn't really like it, much more casual. At the same time, I do this is going to sound pretentious, but I have a degree in engineering, minor in computer science, and I've been designing my own game. I haven't finished it yet to publish it, but I have been designing and looking into how to design games, and I feel like I have some sort of minor inputs here and there. And I would love to get their perspectives more so than, because I feel like I watched the Flats v SVB discussion. I say V. I agree with them completely. They're people, right? Both their opinions are valid, and both of them have made very good points. The only difference between them is one's very optimistic, and one of them is very pessimistic on what this change is going to do and the implications that are driven from it. Namely, a lot of the pros and cons on this sheet. And both of them, I feel like, have a very, very solid understanding of the game and know what's going, for their own niches. I feel like they have a good understanding of what's going to happen. And what do I mean that is, I don't watch their content on a daily basis, but I know SVB's does a lot more community stuff and does a lot more lower rank stuff than Flats. And this 5v5 format is going to make the higher tier you are, the worse it's going to impact you. And that's just the long and the short of it. The lower tier you are, the more fun the game's going to become. It's going to become like a whole new game. It's going to become super refreshing. So you're going to have one of the best times relearning the game, and I think that's what the developers want. They want to recapture that youth of Overwatch. This is like the midlife crisis of Overwatch. They want to capture that high they received the first time they launched it and got everybody interested in the lore, because most of the people who care about the lore left because they stopped giving it after 2017. They've given little breadcrumbs here and there, but I'm sorry, little breadcrumbs starve children when they're trying to live. Eventually it's like, screw this, I'm gonna go over to next door, they have soup. They've got new heroes and constant updates and balance changes over here. I'm going to go ahead and go over to that area. Or maybe things are just more consistent because it's, just a more stable environment that doesn't really require much lore. Or maybe it's a new game or something. And so, I'm going to go to the place where there is lore. And now they're trying to recapture, hey, by the way, here's all the lore that we've been working on. It's like, really? But let's get into then, what can the Overwatch dev team, Tema, do to balance the Overwatch 2 correctly, I guess? And here we go. This is going to be a big list. This is going to be like all the heroes. Right. Let's just start with tanks. The first thing I guess you can probably think about is make tanks either beefier or I don't actually know. I think what I'm going to actually start with here, I think the more critical thought here is DPS. First off, less damage. Because I feel like the number one complaint people are going to have with Overwatch 2 in the 5v5 format with just one tank is they're going to die. There's no way around it. Heroes like Winston are going to do nothing because the second they peek their head around the corner, it's gone. Their head is gone. So, I mean, if right now, even with an off tank, you drop your shield for a half second as Reinhardt and you lose 400 plus HP through armor, like, yeah, even with two supports, you know, as I mentioned before, even with two supports healing you full time, they got to worry about the duelists because the duelists are the ones who are going to make the impact. They're the ones who are going to be getting the picks, and picks are going to be more important now more than ever. So why would the DPS just need to do less damage in order if you're only going to have one tank? That's just along the short of it. And I think I'm also going to skip ahead straight to supports. And also, I'll add this for tank. Nope. Didn't want to do that. There we go. Less damage. Less damage. I think just overall, less damage across the board. And the reason I think this is important, and this could just be me being a lower tier player, aka platinum, high plat, mid plat level, is it decreases the need to have a high reaction time, sometimes up to and including inhuman reaction time, in order to evade the amount of incoming damage. And I think if you make the gameplay more about ebb and flow of damage, it allows for counterplay easier. Things like Pharah and Soldier, right? And Pharah and Mccree. Why does that dynamic work so well? Because Pharah can heal up by hiding around a corner and having the Mercy pocket her. Meanwhile, so the Pharah is having a decent time because she can react to the incoming damage. The only one she can't react to is a Widowmaker headshot, which doesn't feel fun to play against. But I've already stated before, snipers and I feel like the only sniper currently that feels good to play against is Ashe, because you can't get one shot from halfway across the map. That being said, that's the same issue I have with Doomfist. I think Doomfist being able to one-shot you on the other side of the map is dumb. You should be able to take, you know, like the entire play style of Doomfist would change in a heartbeat if they made it so he couldn't one shot with his fist. If he got maybe a little bit more shields, but only did max of 195 damage with his punch, and maybe they did other changes such as that one April Fool's change where he was able to punch into the air, I think that would make him so much more fun. If they gave him 2 charges of his punch and made it so that way it did a lot less damage, maybe that way that he can't just punch you and then punch you again, that would be dumb. So, you know, I think that would be an excellent change. And then also make it so you can punch into the air to do a seismic slam and then uppercut. Maybe that's a weird fake out combination. And if you have your ultimate, so you punch in the air, and then seismic slam, and then uppercut, and then ult, and then you can either escape or pull it right back down on the person. And yeah, that would be, you know, a combo that could one-shot kill, but it would take a lot of his resources, and it would make him vulnerable to anyone else who's going to attack him in that area. The idea is that maybe he can then punch out afterwards, but he has to waste his ult to do that, and in most engagements he wouldn't have that. Things like that would make it more interesting and more fun to play against him, and to probably play as him, because he has more movement options. He can't one-shot anymore, but he's able to reposition easier. So there are ways to balance him that make him semi-fun to play against and still play as. Just not as annoying to play against him. Same thing with like Widowmaker and Hanzo, although they'll be a little bit harder to really rework. I think if they made Widowmaker do less damage overall, to not be able to one-shot people, but maybe if she hits a headshot, that person is able to be seen through walls for the next second or two. So everyone on your team knows, oh, my Widow got a headshot on that person. Maybe that way, you know, or maybe there's an indicator on that person, especially if you're in a 5v5 format. So let me just maybe make that for like snipers. Snipers no longer one shot, max damage 195. Or actually, I don't know what the specific calculation is now. I think it's 75 times 2 times by 0.3 gets you 195. That's right. I don't actually remember. Let me do that quick math. Where's my calculator? There it is. The 75 times 2 times by 1.3. Yeah, that gets you 195. So make max damage 150. 195 damage boost, but headshots do show enemies through walls or add in indication to teammates somehow. They're already talking about a ping system. Maybe it pings the enemy. Oops. And that way, it's a lot more fun to play against Hanzo when he's not one-tapping you with a BS Sonic Arrow halfway across the map or out of spawn. You know, that would be a lot more fun to play against. And it's still rewarding to play as a sniper because, you know, you no longer have to be, this person's one shot, that person's one shot. You know, your team should know because an indicator says, hey, this person's one shot over here. Let me focus him. And it allows you as the player who gets headshot, oh shoot, I'm revealed for 2 seconds, I need to go hide. That, I feel like, would be a pretty good balance change. Doomfist and also Tracer, Blink and Fist allow vertical movement. I think that would make them a lot more viable, but I think ultimately they need to Fist no longer one shots, but has 2 charges. I feel like that would be a fair balance change. Only because, again, I feel personally the biggest complaint about this group of heroes that can one-shot is their one-shot ability. That's the biggest complaint I've heard about Widowmaker. That's the biggest complaint I have heard about Doomfist. Like, that's the annoying. It's the same thing with Roadhog. His hook, left click melee combo. It's annoying. It's like the hook could be really good if hook didn't allow them to basically one-shot you. If hook was something about repositioning the person and requires the enemy team to coordinate to kill you, well, that would be fun. Like, that would be fairer to play against. As it is right now, you're kind of left to this 50-50 of, will it one-shot me or will it not? So, hey, how's it going, bro? So, I feel like that would be a relatively balanced change to Doomfist and Tracer. I think it also allows for heroes like Genji and Winston to be able to actually go in without losing half their HP the second they dive in. So, I think, let me go ahead and do that. I may also add to this just prematurely less healing. Grammar? I can't do grammar apparently. So let's kind of go down the list again. We've got, let me pull up my old changes to Overwatch list. Hopefully this doesn't mess up my current screen. Good. Okay. So I'm just kind of pulling up the heroes from my previous discussion Overwatch, which you can go view on YouTube, on the YouTubes. So in terms of DPS I did last. Ashe, honestly, she's gonna have to do less damage. So I would say max damage. I don't know what would be a fair amount. Probably. Let me pull up my calculator. If I wanted to say do 170 times by 0.7 gives you 119 divided by 2. So that's like 60 damage. So max damage 120, which would be 156. TNT, max damage reduced. I don't know by how much. Conch seems fine. Bob seems fine. I would make Bob fire slower and have less HP. That way he's easier to burn, just like every other person, and won't be a second auto-aiming tank. Because that's the issue with the lower rank is people don't hit many shots, so when you put down like a Torb turret or a Bob turret, they're going to just die to them because they're going to be hit, which they're not used to being hit, period. So I feel like that's a fair trade. It also makes it less annoying at the higher tiers. Especially since Ashe is a sniper, like a pseudo sniper, I feel like her ults like dragons. It's like her ults like dragons to Mccree's high noon is what dragons to Widowmaker's infrared is. That made sense. Widowmaker's infrared and Hanzo's dragons is supposed to be balanced because Widowmaker is hit scan and Hanzo is not. That was like the trade-off as to why Hanzo gets an ultra damaging ult, whereas Widowmaker gets a reconnaissance ult that helps mainly her, but also her teammates at higher tiers. Because that's what high tier players do. They don't use it just for themselves. They use it to gain information as to how the enemy team is going to rotate. But also, if they were a threatening Widowmaker, it would also help just in the fact that she can see enemies and know where they're coming from. So, meanwhile, in the Ashe Mccree dynamic, similar thing where his High Noon can one-shot people, but like objectively it's kind of worse, especially in lower tier. Well, I guess in lower tiers I don't know, compared to Bob is still better in lower tiers. The difference being the fire rate of Mccree and the consistency of Mccree is just much higher, especially in the mid-range fight. And so there's, like, in the places you would use Ashe over Mccree, Widow would be better. And the places where you would choose, Mccree over Ashe, you choose Mccree over Ashe. So the only reason why you would choose an Ashe is maybe you want to get that lucky headshot on the Tracer, or there's a little bit further of a mid-range than you're comfortable fighting as Mccree. I'm trying to think of a specific map that would have that. Because typically you just choose, like, for example, Ilios Well, if you wanted to take the high ground, Ashe would be good for taking the high ground, but even then, Widowmaker is good. Or Lighthouse would be a good Ashe over Mccree map, but even then, fighting on point, you can choose Mccree over her as well. So, it is what it is. Going back to this list, Bastion, Bastion. They've already talked about this. Just first, complete rework. The issue with Bastion is his core concept, and this is something they touched about on stream that I'm going to talk about a little bit. His core concept is damage, lots of damage, but focus on positioning and timing. So they want to retain that core, right? The issue is, in a 5v5 format, timing is going to become even harder because you have less protection. Timing is going to be something that a stationary target is just not able to do, just like it isn't able to do now. So the first thing is move in sentry mode. And I'm just going to kind of list here. I know I should give what I think, but honestly, I have no way of really balancing Bastion easily, aside from a lot less damage. Like, how would his mode work? So he would no longer be able to heal. He would fire tank mode in so he would fire how would I put it? Fire, like, he would have a different primary or secondary. It's how the dev team has put it before. They were experimenting with that. I think the inherent issue is the transition, right? The transformation between two modes is like, imagine you had to worry about the Genji blade or the soldier ultimate tac visor booting up every single time you wanted to do a lot of damage. What I would suggest, and on top of that, in higher tiers, Bastion being stationary means that he's easy to run over. And in lower tiers, there's no situation I can think of where picking Junkrat just wouldn't be better, because if it's one thing that lower rank players can hit, it's a stationary target. So why would they choose, you can, at the very least with Bastion, you can sit back or with Junkrat, you could sit back behind a wall or something and just lob in the general area. It takes less skill, takes less risk, and deals just about the same, if not more damage, and his ult's actually more consistent than Bastion's. Like, there's not really any situation where you would choose Bastion over Junkrat, except in, like, super niche pirate ship kind of compositions. And even then, it's like, you know, make bank or go bust kind of situations in reality, where you're in overtime, you have 1 minute left to push escort on Gibraltar, and you're just trying to do whatever you can to prevent them from capping the first point. That's really what Bastion's right now known for. And that's honestly, you know, okay, especially with how many DPS the game currently has. But I would add some kind of mortar system. So fire in the air and it drops from the sky kind of system after like 3 seconds. I would say the issue with his ult is it doesn't match the rest of his kit. It matches the core concept, but it's because what are the two things that I think like you focus on with Bastion is transforming and being able to time your shots or time your abilities to get maximal effect without dying. The issue with that is you go into sentry mode and then you're firing a minigun. You come out of sentry mode, you're firing a recon, hit scan, and then you go into tank mode and you fire missiles. Like, that's just not very consistent with the rest of his kit. So I would come back to him, I think. He's going to need to be reworked. Doomfist, already talked about above. Echo. Again, just overall, just less damage. Just less damage. That needs to be key, because survivability is really what this game needs in order to survive. Like, if you're gonna have one tank, the tank needs to be able to survive. More HP maybe, just so that way you can give your supports more ult charge in a ult charge deprived system, game, best way I can put it. And at the same time, allow you to survive. Just, that's the thing. Survivability is what's going to allow the tanks to do anything in terms of making space, now that they don't have an additional tank to help them do that. And if everyone doesn't do less damage, if everyone has a health buff instead, that would do effectively the same thing. You just have to nerf how much the ult charges cost to retain that less ult generation. Which goes back to my point about how a lot of these pros, they can still fix. They could fix that right now. They could make less ult generation happen right now. They could make getting picks mean more right now. They can make queue times faster. Whoa, Jesus. Right now. The only thing is they would have to make tanks more fun to play and make DPS and tanks more fun to play against. And I think that's the key. Having the focus shift from make this hero fun to play above all else to make these heroes fun to play against above all else. That's what's going to make the game just more competitive. I don't know if I really want to go through every single one of these heroes. Genji, again, nerf damage. I think he's in a decent position. The only issue is he doesn't feel fun to play against because he can burst out damage. Burst damage isn't fun to play against, but it is needed in sometimes to make plays. Now, as Genji, it's not fun to play against people with stuns. And I think this is more of a combination of nano boosted Genjis. Like, I think nano's a huge problem with heroes like Genji, but I don't know how I would fix it. Maybe make nano boosts damage not as strong. I would decrease how much damage boost you get from nano boost. I think the core concept that I'm trying to get at is what would be quote unquote right to balance Overwatch 2 and Overwatch 1, mainly the competitive Overwatch. How to balance it correctly is excuse me. In order to balance Overwatch 1 correctly, they need to make heroes more fun to play against and slow down the game. They need to target unfun abilities like Sombra's Hack. Actually, let me go ahead and talk about that real quick. Sombra, if hacking made targets vulnerable, meaning, hey, I just hacked their Ana. She can now be one-shot by snipers for the next 6 seconds. That would be vastly greater than silencing that Ana. Or more likely, silencing the Reinhardt. Because at least now it's like, okay, the Reinhardt's easier to kill now. Let's push in on that. Meanwhile, the Reinhardt still has everything else the same. He would just have to play like he's playing currently in Overwatch 1, where if he drops his shield, suddenly he's gonna die in less than a second. And it'll make, it'll give your team the advantage because he has to hold the shield up. So now you can potentially win the shield war because if he drops it, he's gonna die. And that means if you have a Reinhardt, well, he's going to lose his shield first, then get shattered, and your team wins the fight. Just the same as it is now. That being said, if you made it so the... additionally, it'll fit her assassin role, in the sense that if she hacks a squishy, not only can she dive the target with another person, it'll make it to her little damage, because compared to most DPS, she actually does a relatively low amount of damage. It'll make it so that she can actually potentially kill someone by herself, giving her playmaking abilities, while still adding counterplay, because she won't one-shot them like any of the other unfun heroes. So that's what I would put down for Sombra. I'm just going to throw her down here. Sombra Hack makes targets vulnerable. Did I actually spell that right? Oh, nice. So, and then EMP makes all targets vulnerable for all targets hit vulnerable and removes shields. That way it's still like it will be effective against certain compositions and it will be more niche. So if they have a Zarya Zen composition, like a Zarya Zen Sim composition, won't be viable purely because if they run a Sombra, all of them are dead. Unless Zen gets his Transcendence off before the EMP. Only way to save it. So I think that's a big one in my mind. I'm trying to think who else. So Hanzo, talked about it up here. Sniper's no longer one-shotting. I would maybe get rid of Storm Arrow. I would say Hanzo, make Storm Arrow do a lot less damage, but pierce. That way, like, because that was the thing I was thinking about was, well, what role would snipers have? Well, the idea of snipers was to burst through armor. That's another thing. Armor changes. I would change armor to be flat reduction purely to simplify gameplay. And the reason why simplifying gameplay here is fine is because it's one less thing to think about if you're new, and it's one less thing to think about when you're at the pro scene. It makes heroes a lot easier to balance because the tuning knob doesn't have 16 different like nuanced things that do relatively nothing aside from make burst heroes better, which burst heroes for the most part are the unfun heroes. Like, think about it. Hanzo, unfun to play against. Mccree, 3-tapping you from a distance. Okay, because you can still kind of get away from it. But if he's, a damage boosted Mccree, 2-shotting a hog, like, that's not fun to play against. Widowmaker, not fun to play against. Ashe sometimes isn't fun to play against, especially if you're like a tracer. Heck, even a nano boosted Reinhardt isn't that fun to play against when his swings do like 100 damage. Like, but at that point, it's like, okay, he's using an ultimate for that whatever we just reset. Like, I don't know. I feel like burst damage is the unfun, but necessary. But you can limit it to some degree. Meanwhile, what does armor do? Armor makes it so that way burst damage is better. And one of the reasons why burst damage was so good during like say right before GOATs, and well, not after GOATs because double shield, but right before GOATs, burst was like king because you had Lucio, you had Brig, and you had like Ana, or you had and then you had a bunch of tanks. And the main idea was you'd get a bunch of AoE healing. You also have Zenyatta with Discord. A lot of GOATs revolved around the fact that you had a bunch of AoE healing, so no one died. Not to mention, the tanks could do equal, if not more damage, cough cough, Zarya, in order to more than make up for the lost damage dealers. And that's the real issue. In my eyes, GOATs would never have happened if tanks couldn't do more damage. Because if nothing ever died and you all just kept playing, like, eventually someone would just it become a patience of war, or a war of patience. Like, you would just sit there until one Reinhardt said enough of this, because you'd have like 7 ultimates in one fight. That was the first fight that would last for a minute and a half, and then the next fight would get the team who won the first one up to 99%, and if they lost that fight and it switched over to the second team's control, well, that's what it would have turned into. And the only reason why I didn't, and it was a lot more quote-unquote fun, was because some of the tanks could do damage equal to a DPS. And on top of that, in order to solve the quote-unquote GOATs meta or GOATs era, they buffed a lot of damage in order to overcome the burst healing, which was given as a way to counteract the amount of damage coming out, because we were switching between this like 4 tank composition and a like 3-4 DPS compositions that were like the highest tier of plays, and there was just this overall increase of healing and like AoE healing at that, and burst damage. And that's what armor stops. Armor stops the damage over time or the spread damage like Tracer, Reaper, Soldier, Sombra, Wrecking Ball. These types of heroes, they're the ones being impacted heavily by armor. And even then, some of them aren't impacted that much because of how armor works, which is super nuanced of it deals half damage up to X amount, and beyond that, it does X, damage, like a flat damage reduction. So it's super weird. Like if I were to do a burst damage shot, it only gets rid of, I think, 3 or 5, whichever one it's at right now. But if I did less than that, it would only deal half. So if I was Tracer and I did one tick of damage that did 5 damage or something, that would actually only do 2 damage. And then every shot would only do 2 damage to an armored target until the armor was gone. And as soon as the armor's gone, now it's at 5 damage. Armor just needed to be reworked. It did things that I don't think were intended. And it's also an opportunity, if you make it a flat damage reduction, to be like, hey, snipers can have the added bonus of, piercing the armor, not getting that flat armor reduction. Something like that. Junkrat, he's the next boy. I think my old stuff is still relatively accurate here. Whoa, that ended up weird. But I would just say this would be the ult. Oh. Ah. That's what the stream has turned into, me struggling with the word. But I feel like his ult will feel a lot more fair. The issue with this is that it takes the skill out of his ultimate. But it would be a lot more fair to play against. Especially for given how much damage it does. But at the same time, this is optional, I feel like. I feel like changing his ult wouldn't make it that much of a difference. It's just an idea or concept of how to maybe change it to make it more fun to play against. Additionally, it can't headshot, which is why I said 100, but I think that it does 130 max then. It's still, it would be pretty bad to play against, but it would be, And then concussions damage reduced, that's his concussion mine. Mion. And trap damage would be reduced, because it does a crap ton. Trap does a lot, but it's super obvious unless you're not paying attention. And more than anything, Trap also maybe just remove Trap, maybe, because it is unfun in the sense that it removes a core thing of Overwatch. One of the things of Overwatch that is just inherent, and it's the reason why Bastion's bad if in higher tiers of play, is the lack of mobility. Mobility is king in Overwatch. That's just the truth. And I don't know. I feel being able to remove someone's mobility, especially when a pick means a heck of a lot nowadays in the 5v5 era, might be kind of overpowered. So maybe just lower trap duration. Make it a slow. Something along those lines where your speed is reduced by like 80% or something. Like, maybe that would be fair. Oh yeah, echo. First and foremost, I would make what are they called? Right click has damage fall off, because I'm pretty sure right now it doesn't. But yeah, that's something I would definitely change about echo. I would also make it so dies in ult dies in ult, then dies and respawns. Because the real broken part about Echo is you can use her to basically get a second life, and then if that fails, it resets all of your cooldowns, and you come out even now at 100 HP. And I feel like that just makes her ult not skillful to use. If you're going to have an ult like that, that in 5v5 makes it so you can essentially have two tanks. On top of being able to burst out like 200 damage or 300 damage per second or something with her beam, on top of being able to nearly one-shot people with her right click, on top of being able to just do a crap ton of fairly accurate left click damage that's just a projectile. Like, she just feels overpowered subtly. Like, she feels like just like a better Genji almost. Only difference is that Genji can deflect ults and stuff. So who's next? Mccree. See, now this one's an interesting one, because what I would do to him, change flashbang to flashbang to pocket sand. And the only reason why I'm nervous about that one is part of the interaction between Genji and Mccree is that you can stun him, but Genji can outplay you by deflecting your stun and then killing you in turn. Whereas pocket sand would be more like rock, which just makes it, you know, more consistent, because I feel like one of the bigger issues with flashbang as well is its AoE is kind of broken, both the player and the person playing against the player. So actually, I take this best. What I think would probably be just remove flashbang. The issue is what I would replace it with is, I don't know. Maybe more mobility. Because the two things that are dumb about Mccree is his CC and his right click. The core of him is being a low mobility, high medium range damage dealer. That's like the core of him. That and cowboy themed. So how you maintain that presence without becoming weaker than other people, but also not becoming overpowered, is a bit of a challenge. Also, it doesn't help the fact that it's 11:20 at night. I'm starting to get a little bit fried in the brain. I've said most of the things I've already wanted to say, which I'll just reiterate in a second. I think it comes down to this ultimately here. Overwatch 2 can be good. The 5v5 Overwatch 2 5v5 can be good if the dev team balances the heroes well. Summary here: less damage, less healing, no one-shots, more mobility, and focus on removing unfun to play against playstyles. This would be like my summary of it. I feel like Overwatch 2 5v5 can be good if the development team does what some of the higher level also focus competitive I can't spell competitive play on top tier players, focus PvE for casual players, focus competitive play and unrated play for top tiers players, focus PvE and maybe quick play arcade for casual players. That's like the summary of everything, I feel like, right there. That, or how, like, so ultimately it can be good if they balance everything right. They rework things that need to be reworked. They rework maps that need to be reworked. And they balance heroes that need to be balanced. And they shift their focus into two parts. Competitive is competitive. Casual is casual. No balancing for casual. Balance for competitive. That would be the focus if you're going to make 5v5 better for the higher tier player. They're probably not going to do that. And the main reason they're not going to do that is they're shifting towards a casual player base. They want more people to be able to get into the game. They want to have more players get into the game. The downside is that means there's going to be probably less competitive players joining the rosters, which will make the competitive side of Overwatch less fun. Additionally, we're not even talking about the MMR issue, because other games never had to worry about hero-based MMR. The issue Overwatch has is if a Widow, Hanzo, or Sniper player plays and gets top 500 and is suddenly thrown into double shield meta, they're not going to be able to play at a top 500 level because their hero doesn't work. So they have to learn on the fly another hero that's like Genji or Tracer or something like that, or, you know, Reaper or something that maybe they're not that good at, but their MMR is still at top 500 of their Sniper MMR. And then anytime they want to play, we know the second that Sniper comes back into play, well, then they jump through the ranks again. And conversely, if you have some hero like Brig come out or Sigma come out, where they're just stupidly broken and have an era where they're a must pick and work well with any other support or any other tank, well, then their MMR jumps through the roof, and all they have to do is play like in the last 7 days, and they maintain their rank. And then they throw basically all the games, because now that their hero isn't as good as they was when they were climbing through the ranks, the hero plays completely differently than how it did like 4 months ago while they were constantly nerfing them. You're just not going to have a fun time yourself. You're going to ruin the game for everyone else in that lobby. And it's this question of, we need to have an MMR reset, but we can't have, like, the benefit versus the penalty of an MMR reset still favors the penalty column in terms of like, we shouldn't do it because the repercussions would be beyond terrible for that first week or whatever. The upside is it would cleanse all of the poor balanced choices that have put people's MMR in bad places. And the only way to technically rectify that easily would be to somehow specifically target players based upon their heroes played hours. Now, because that's one thing that the tank support and role queue in general and DPS queues, like, that helped a lot, because now you're not having a DPS Torb one trick suddenly have to play goats. You know, he doesn't have to play support. He doesn't have to play DPS. He just has to, you know, he has to be in the 2-2-2 meta. He can choose whatever DPS he wants. But his terrible Ana gameplay isn't going to impact his Torb gameplay, right? The MMR of the hero's roles is segmented. But let's say I'm playing Heroes of the Storm and I play Abathur nonstop, and then suddenly I play I don't know, Tyrael, right? The MMR on Tyrael I have is different from the MMR I have on Abathur. They're two different heroes, and I'll only be matched with people with the MMR I have on that specific hero. That's a downside that being able to change mid-game Overwatch has. Being able to balance around that causes a lot of competitive issues. You get a Genji one trick suddenly having to play a Reaper or a Sombra or Symmetra or something for a strategy, or you inversely get a Bastion one trick who needs to play in goats or something, or needs to play a sniper or something to take care of their Widowmaker that's just doing nothing but absurd amounts of damage. And you're on Hanamura, so there's no way around that. Like, there are they need to figure out a way to balance that MMR if they're not going to just reset or do mini resets or targeted resets every now and then, or maybe just, you know, do mini purges or something where they go through and they say, all right, in this ratings, this is where we notice the biggest jump of SR on this hero, so we're going to go ahead and do a pseudo purge. The issue with the pseudo purges, they used to do it where every single season you'd lose naturally like 400 SR. People who were like, I'm platinum and I just want to play casually, because I don't play competitively to grind my rank, I just fall down to gold. And then the next season I fall down to silver. And then the next thing you know, I'm trapped in silver. But their reasoning is, oh yeah, but it's fun to climb back your SR, right? It's like, no. Especially down in those cesspools. Like, no offense to bronze or silver players. I used to be a silver player. I was low end, I was like 1600 at one point. And the only real answer I got, like, this is something you won't hear from a lot of the higher, like, top 500 players. Each rank has its own way to climb out of it. That's just the truth. It's because the people in that rank only understand certain things and only have so fast of a reaction time to be able to do the necessary things. You're not going to get passive healing in silver. You're going to have to wait 5-6 seconds while spamming I need healing standing next to the person who's literally trying to hit a Pharah out of the sky, and you're like, what are you doing? You're Mercy. Just heal me, please. Why are you like this? That is what some of the nonsense that happens down there. And I climbed out of it back before roll queue. I actually played Zen to get out of it because I could do damage myself while making sure my team actually had some iota of healing. So it's just a frag fest down there. You just need to frag out, and every fight is more or less winnable because there's no win conditions. The win condition is you kill everyone. That's what that area was like. And then it wasn't really back until gold, high gold to platinum that people started to actually kind of work together, and then synergies mattered, and then being able to play the game was fun. Roll Q did help with that. I will say that it made, not getting 5 DPS a blessing. But I will say that it made it easier and better for the lower tier, but it's still more or less just a frag fest. Like, they still don't have the reaction time or the capacity to just kind of figure out, like, hey, maybe I should stop and watch a replay, figure out, why is this happening? And even if they do, they need their teammates to do the same. And that's not always the case. It's really not. So I feel like there's a lot of bronze players that if they were thrown into gold, you wouldn't notice the difference. And in fact, they would probably climb up to platinum. And there's a lot of diamond master players that if they were thrown into platinum, they would never touch diamond again. Especially since if they climbed up there abusing Brig or abusing Moira back when she was OP, or abusing Sigma when he was OP. And that's the other thing with how metas go. They have the inherent issue of balancing, where when a hero is strong, they naturally get 200 SR or 300 SR just by being that hero. And whether that's good or bad, that's kind of, where we're at. So these are things that would, be what they would need to kind of normalize a lot of that kind of issues, I guess you could say. Obviously, aside from things like, just add more heroes, please. I think the greater concern is the fact that, as a tank player, you get an option of 6 heroes, but let's say it's not working and you wanted to try 5 DPS just to see if it would work. Well, that's taken away from you, and that's, you're losing one of the appeals of playing Overwatch. Additionally, the tank DPS support queue has brought to light the fact that, that having different SRs is really good, but how come you don't have different SRs per hero? Well, because it's literally impossible. Doing it role-based is probably the best that you can get in terms of separating things. But then you get, still playing DPS. If I play Genji, that doesn't translate well to my Doomfist. My Doomfist doesn't translate well to my Widow. It's not perfect by any means. And I feel like another thing, going back to this, where in the community's eyes, it doesn't feel like they've balanced well as well. I also think in the community's eyes, it's a negative when we tell them, hey, we have too many DPS. Maybe you could do something like split the roles back up and make it so attackers can only... The attacker DPS can only choose from attacker DPSs. And the defender DPS can only choose from defender DPSs. Maybe that would make it, semi-more balanced. It would also force a lot of one-trick DPSs to not one-trick. I mean, it would help with that a little bit. That being said, you're still going to be doing the same thing right now of you're forcing people to not be able to play what they want unless they choose that specific role. And if it happens to be the role that has the most amount of heroes, you're just going to have to wait. And that's just that. So I feel like this would be a good time to transition from random BS that's not really related to the Overwatch 2 stuff to one of the comments made from the developers during the AMA. They said, let me see if I can bring this up. Copy. So let's go ahead. AMA. Have you ever considered adding a ping like that? Was actually not the one I wanted to do. Dang it. Alright. That up here. Is this the one? This one is a great thing in terms of the sniper thing that I was talking about before. I think this would be ideal in terms of like how you could fix snipers and make them more fun to play against. This one. This is the one that I wanted. What's going to happen to 2CP? Will the maps be reworked for different modes, or is it getting a major readjustment? Each Overwatch game mode requires very different maps. Reworking the original 2CP maps into another game mode would probably be just as hard, if not harder, than building a whole new map from scratch with that particular art kit. As far as its future is concerned, we've talked about giving it a place in the arcade, and we don't have plans to build any future 2CP maps. The first thing that I want to say is pointed out by Master E and Gamer. There was another map called Bangle something. I apologize to it's. I honestly don't remember. It began with a B, but it was showcased at BlizzCon as what seemed to be a 2CP map. And yet, they said that in a different AMA portion, that I don't actually have saved because I saw that video after I made these pictures, that the Overwatch, that specific like map type that was shown was they didn't actually realize that it was shown. They forgot about that, and that it's sorry, I'm having OneNote issues. It's being stupid. Hold on one second. All right. What was I saying? The map that I was referring to that begins with a B that I can't remember. They had I had shown stuff, a image about it or a presentation about it, and they said that it's part of a new game mode that's coming out that they don't want. That's different from Push. They had mentioned that's what that map's going to be, even though that the BlizzCon presentation clearly showed the 2CP ticker going around. And according to this post right here in the AMA, if they were to change it, which it sounds like they did do, then it would be just as hard, if not harder, to rework that map. So that seems a bit weird because it seems like that was a new decision between the 2019 BlizzCon and now that they've changed that map in particular and done this whole 2CP going away thing. And as I've referred to before in my last discussion, there are plenty of ways to rework the art style of 2CP to work in a competitive environment that wouldn't be that bad. Because again, you got to come at it with an understanding of, or a perspective of, why is this bad? Why do people why do they not like this? Why do they not like 2CP? Why do they not like Assault game mode? And the answer is simple. Single choke, relatively easy to take first point, and endless stall second point. The first point is objectively, I'm sorry, this is objectively, the first point is vastly better than the second point. Every time you take the first point, you're like, okay, this is going to be a slog, and either we're going to take it or we're not. There's no in between. The second point, however, it's like, unless we get lucky as heck and we just out-frag them, there's no way we're taking this. We got to get a lucky, like, 2 picks in the beginning without losing anyone to be able to get through one of the 3 different choke points and then get onto point and stay on point and sustain on point, with the respawn being so close. And the answer to that is simple. Make second point just like first point. Make the defender spawn relatively, closer than the attackers, but still not right on top of the point. So all it takes is one team wipe or like one or two picks, and then suddenly the attackers move in. Now there is another way of balancing this that would be equally as exciting and would offer up new gameplay opportunities. Make it a multi-point objective. So point A has 3 different objectives, and they're each in a different section behind the choke point. And the attackers have to cap all 3 objectives. And now this leads to, okay, we can either bunker on 1 point, split between 2 points, or have a multi-pronged assault. And we just give up 1 point, maybe. It also give tanks a thing to feel good about. Make their mini objectives for tanks to, be easier to do. Make it a passive. Make it so tanks take objectives quicker. There are things that you can do to 2CP that would make it viable. That would just be a number change in some cases. Now, in terms of map rework, you can make the top of the pagoda on Hanamura 1 objective. You can make the building to the right of point, or make it so the trying to think of location, like you can make it so that that building maybe extends a little bit further back, and make the upper stairs of that place of that pagoda a mini point as well. And you could make the objectives smaller around the bell or something. It wouldn't. I don't think it would take that much change in the map design of the current 2CP maps to make them viable. Now, would it take work and would it take effort that you would take away from balancing everything else and reworking every other single hero? Absolutely. Would that delay the game and make it go even further back, put you even further in debt because you guys are overhyping a game that you had to release information on before you guys were ready, and you're asking for forgiveness and to stop putting high expectations on the game in order to make it do even better than expected? Understood. That is something that I do completely sympathize with. Do I think it excuses you guys from saying things like, it's not easy to rework? Personally, no. I think you guys should at least own up to the fact that while it is something that we could do and would be not that difficult of a change, there is a lot of other pressing issues that take priority that are first on our plate. For example, would you rather the heroes be balanced on any map, or would you rather 2CP be reworked? I think everyone would choose the former. Let's just like the easy solution for making it feel more competitive is while we are working on Overwatch 2 and the competitive, like we're working on the story of Overwatch 2, the factions, the PvE, the assets required, because I don't think people understand how much effort goes into making a PvE game, how many additional assets you have to create, and how many nuanced balance changes you have to make in order to create a PvE game. That's something that takes a lot of effort. In addition to that, they're also trying to balance Overwatch 1. This is the reason, I think honestly, you guys say, oh yeah, we have a big team. Are you guys including the Overwatch League stuff? Like the members who are working on the Overwatch League team? Are you including people who are split between the PvP and the PvE content? Are you also including the people in the Overwatch balance patches, which have to take the ideas from the Overwatch 1 community and apply it to both Overwatch 2 and Overwatch 1? I feel like, yes, it's a big team comparatively to the normal size of the industry. I don't think you guys have the manpower to do what it is you guys are not promising, but trying to do well. You being the Overwatch developers. That being said, I'm just a small-time streamer who doesn't actually even stream Overwatch. I talk about how much I play Overwatch, and maybe one day I'll just actually start playing. I'm just so self-conscious. I don't like playing competitive games on stream because I'm completely different. I'm relatively calm and rational and able to kind of articulate things and observe game design passively while playing a more casual first, single player type of game. Um, I'm much more competitive and I get relatively Winston angry when I'm playing inside of game modes and I think I should be winning and when I'm just really bad at the game. So I know it's never going to reach the ears of even other content creators like Flats or SVB or Master Ian Gamer or people like that who would be able to kind of objectively view my opinions. But hey, if that ever does happen, thanks guys for making awesome content. Thank you Overwatch developers for making this amazing game. I've already kind of stated all this stuff. The ping system would go into what I was talking about with the snipers. The big Overwatch 1 news, they did mention that there was something between soon and very soon, which means 2 days or 2 years, as someone else put it. I forget who exactly it was. So, who knows? I'm personally betting on maybe the ping system or a clan system, since both of those have already been hinted at. I don't think it's going to be something that's going to... It's just going to leave more... If they did it well, if they had changed this thing, it would be so much better. So many little quality of life things that sometimes they focus too much on and sometimes they just completely ignore for no good reason. So I don't necessarily know where to go from here. I think I've said everything that I needed to say. The only things that I could leave is let me see here. The Galapagos thing, that was something your Overwatch mentioned. New map, maybe 2 CP maps. I've gone into it in length. We could you can make it so that they're a 3 CP map essentially, or a 4 CP map. Just take Hanzo, for example, and then copy it, duplicate it, invert it, so that way first point's parallel to second point, second point's parallel to first point, make a giant rectangle, and then you make, we'll say, let me bring up Paint for this, or actually Inkscape might work too. Hello, Inkscape? Maybe it won't work. All right, here we go. Oh, I need to add a scene for this. Of course I do. Yeah. Let's go ahead and close that real quick. Oh, lordy Lou. It's large. So if you had... if let's say this is Hanzo, right? If you just take something along these lines where you have point A, point B, point C, and like point D maybe, or something along those lines. And so you have attackers, oops. You have attackers spawn here. Let me go ahead and make this bright red and just use attackers as an example. So attackers spawn here, and then attackers spawn here. Then, once they capture point B, attackers will spawn, I don't know, probably, so let me go ahead and choose defender spawn now. So defenders spawn here for the first point. For the second point, defenders would spawn there. So then the attackers would just spawn, so when they're recapping in the new A point or something along those lines, maybe we would take, these and move it over here. There we go. And we would make attackers spawn where are you? Here to attack C. And then we would, once they cap C, make them spawn like here or something. And then defenders would spawn, so let me do this. So attackers, 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 attackers. They cap this, they go back to this guy. And then defenders, oops. So defenders, defenders. So then they would spawn here to defend that one. Then they would spawn at the attacker's first spawn to defend the last point. Something like that, right? Doesn't have to be that convoluted for 4 points going in a circle. It would be like a marathon. You'd get a fixed amount of time like Push has, and you would do this. And who knows, maybe this is the new game mode. Maybe they want to completely erase everyone's memory of 2CP. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's the big brain play. They're actually creating a 4CP, 3CP mode that maybe it has multi-objectives. I don't know. Maybe it's just like original Assault, but it just goes in a circle with a fixed time, so there's never any real draws that happen. Well, there's still going to be a lot of draws, but like maybe their idea is as soon as you win a single fight, you cap that point, and you just keep capping points until you run out of time. And once you run out of time, you run out of time. Then the next attackers go, and they start at the first one, and they go, and if they can't cap as many points as you've capped, you win. And they make it so that way, you know, just inherently, even if you steamroll and you cap like, I don't know, 2 rotations, right? You go through 2 rotations of 4 CP, you capped 8 points. Okay, now they got to see if the enemy team can do the same. Or something like that. I think the two annoying part, another annoying part, for example, a third one, let's say, of 2CP was the fact that you constantly had to switch between attackers and then defenders and then attackers and then defenders. And maybe now because you have less time, you're defending instead of attacking. But now you both have 1 minute, so you're attacking back instead of defending. And it's like, well, what the heck am I doing? Meanwhile, like Push or Control, you're attacking and then you're defending. And then Hybrid and Escort, you're attacking and then you're defending. And yeah, you switch back and forth, but not as frequently as you do on 2CP. Now, the only other thing that I would say they would have to change is the entrance to certain 2CP areas, because Hanamura, choke point, Horizon Lunar Colony, choke point, Paris, choke point, and Volskaya's honestly first point seems a little bit better than the rest, because there's at least the option, like the secondary option you get, which is going around the left side, is semi-viable actually, although it's super dangerous to do and often leads to just like, you know, your plan being completely blown open. But you know, it kind of is what it is in terms of like making it work, I guess, compared to Hanamura. Top left corner is your only other go through aside from the main choke. It's just so abysmal to push through. You look at Horizon Lunar Colony, you have to go through this weird like angled funnel kind of thing in order to either get to space, which has an effect on you, or go through the left hand side that's completely open to the point in the high ground shooting at you. Not very viable. You look at Paris, where do you even start with that? Like the only secondary route is something that requires you to be Ball or Pharah or Doomfist to get over. And once you do get over it, there's no cover. Like, it's only really good if you're Pharah or you're against an oblivious team. Like, there is no in-between on that. So, that's something like, that choke point being better, I feel like would be needed. And I feel like I'm unsure of like why they would be under the impression, like, I don't know. I feel like the only big brain thing here is if they're going, hey, we don't want to waste time reworking the maps right now. And in the future, we will rework them, but we're not going to call it Assault. Assault's gone. We're going to call it Marathon Assault, or we're going to call it Marathon Point Capture, or something more catchy than I can come up with. They've got some PR guy who's got names out the wazoo, thinking of new things. But that was the main points I wanted to address from the AMAs that I have seen, as well as a lot of content creators. Again, I feel for the tank players who can't tank duo anymore. I feel for like the quick play warriors who's got 6 stacking going on. And I feel for the Overwatch League. I do think for the casual player base, this is going to be a win. I think this is going to be a fun, new, refreshing game mode. Game. Do I think at the same time what they're going to do is they're going to go free to play and do that whole, you know, kit and caboodle of battle pass, new skins specifically, you know, if you pay $100 extra. Look at these new cosmetics. We're now going to promote community stuff. Like, honestly, I feel like what they need to do to compete competitively in like the gaming market would be to make Overwatch more community oriented, take more ideas from the community at the high level for competitive play and at the low level for casual play. Isolate your markets, play to both, but like don't mix the two. You can have yin and yang together, but you notice how you don't have a giant gray blob when you look at the yin and yang circle. You've got competitive aspects inside of the casual environment and casual aspects inside of the competitive environment. And you just got to make sure that they remain in balance and that the competitive is mostly competitive and the casual is mostly casual. That's going to be the key moving forward. And the pushback by the community for this change is warranted. And I'm sorry, developers, it is. That is the plain truth. You want this to be successful, you need to be transparent. And I don't mean more transparent. That's like saying, I chipped off a piece of this rock. You can see around it a little better. Look, it's more transparent. No. Being more transparent than you have before is more or less just false hope. You need to be telling us what you're balancing around. You need to be telling us about these new heroes. Last time I checked, the thing was at BlizzCon 2019. I may be misremembering. However, I believe the development team had mentioned that you guys have 5 potential new heroes, and one of them is Sojourn, a DPS. You guys have been probably balancing around 5v5 for a while. And again, community-wise, great, you're telling us about 5v5 now, even though you've probably been balancing around it for months. And we've been going, why are you making these dumb changes? Why are you not making the obvious changes? And I would say, even if you are balancing around internal changes, don't. The community doesn't care what's happening internally. They care about what they're playing now. They care about what's unfun now. And I'm sorry to say it as bluntly as I can, but that's the truth. If you want it to be more competitive and more fun, don't balance around things that aren't on live. Don't balance around things that, don't you guys just you don't know yet, but it's going to be so much better. I mean, that's literally the false hope that we've always been getting, is this, it could be so good if you just don't do this, and you guys going, we are doing that, just wait a little bit, because we got to keep it a secret. Like, that's not how you build community trust. That's not how you build a community player base that's going to play competitively, stick around for the competitive scene, and join your Overwatch League, which will earn you even more money. That's not how you do it. That's not how any of the other scenes do it either, because they know it's bad business to be taking out your own foundation, essentially. And that's why a lot of these people who are complaining about 5v5 happening, that's really what they're complaining about, is they feel like you're taking a brick or a sledgehammer to your brick foundation of your already crumbling house that's been crumbling from various bad decisions over the years, and having 0 repairs aside from a band-aid here and there. And I can give examples if you want, such as the Brigida going live, as Sigma coming out right as soon as Rollock happened, and you get a tank synergy that just dominates everything. Giving Wrecking Ball the ability to essentially go through all the enemies, boop them all around, and then just escape with 1100 HP that gives 0 ult charge for 700 of it. Or at the time, it was 1300. Giving, various balances, buffs around goats, only to then have to go back and nerf it, buffing every single hero to do absurd amounts of damage to be able to just do something to the goats meta, messing around with various supports, making them semi-unplayable, such as you needed to buff Discord just to make Zen viable, nerfing speed but making Reddit Lucio more viable by giving, I think it was himself, more speed. Mercy, Resurrect in general, not removing Resurrect period, or doing something similar to you resurrect someone, it just means that they respawn instantly. Why hasn't that been what Resurrect is? That would be so much more fair, instead of bringing them right back up where they are, or making them resurrect at half HP and making the other half self-damage so that the Mercy doesn't get back ult charge for healing that missing health. There's ways to balance those things, and instead you just made her a res bot, as EVA once put it. I feel like these are the design choices and the balance choices that just instill a lack of confidence. And some of them, it's like, why hasn't DLive been taken care of? Well, if only you guys knew we've been working on Brig. Like, honestly, I want to say ever since Doomfist was released, I want to say the bad decisions have been, like, Orisa was the change. I don't know, maybe Sombra. One of those two. Like, Ana was a great addition, in my opinion. A skill-based support that added to the support roster and required, high heals, but high return on your mechanical skill. and was able to kind of sustain herself without being brokenly overpowered, aside from maybe her nade preventing all healing instead of just reducing it by like 80% or something. That's the only place where I think Ana's too powerful. But if you reduce all healing and you reduce all damage, then that effect doesn't matter as much. It still is a go signal in a 5v5 situation for if you get any single pick at all, it will be very beneficial. But you, as collectively, when I say you, I definitely mean the development team of Overwatch and Overwatch 2, you need to consider making the plays last longer or make the plays end longer and last shorter. That's the best way I can describe it. You didn't make it so that way it's not something where, oh, and then Fleta killed 5 people with Widowmaker, just shooting them by doing a hook shot, and killed 3, and then managed to kill 2 off the hook shot and run around the corner, killed another 2, and then made both tanks at half HP from 3 miles away on Junkertown. Like, entertaining, maybe, but fun to play against and competitive. I mean, this is something the Diva change with Void getting a 3K, killing a Mercy through a doorway. It doesn't instill confidence that you can make good decisions on a competitive scale. I'm beating a dead horse at this point. I feel like these are examples of why people are concerned Overwatch 2 will be a flop. I've been talking for 3 hours now. It's midnight around where I am, and I think I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I always love talking about this. I'm going to have this YouTube video put up. I might edit it down as my first edited videos. Said that about my last discussion, but who knows? This one I'm a little bit more passionate about since we're finally getting news. I will say, like, again, this is no disrespect to the Overwatch 2 developers. I know that this is a hard game and a hard position that you guys have been put into. And I do think you're doing an excellent job, especially given all of the crap you have been given. I think, or rather I hope, under new management with Papa Aaron, you will be more open to being transparent. And I mean fully transparent, or as full as you can get. Give us roadmaps. Give us things to look forward to at the very, very least. Things that we're not going to be pulling our heads out going, why did they make this change? It's kind of dumb. Maybe there's some internal thing that we're not considering. And I would say that in my head, my excuse has always been for you guys, you just don't have a big enough team to do this. The amount of content that you would have to change and balance and test, you just don't have a big enough team. And you definitely don't have any top 500 players play testing a lot of these things. A lot of these things feel like platinum players play testing them and then giving it the A-OK. That's just my opinion. And the opinion of some other people I have talked to. And I don't know. I feel like that's the big issue in my head. Or at least one of them. Before I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and just zoom through all of these other heroes. See if there's anyone that sticks out. Mei. Honestly, I wouldn't even be opposed of Mei being a tank at this point. Give the tanks another hero and reduce the DPS heroes. Getting rid of freezing altogether and doing more damage. Get rid of the more damage portion and I'm happy. Pharah, less damage overall. And make it so she doesn't do self-damage. No self-damage, please. Just remove self-damage. Remove rocket self-damage. Remove Sigma Ball self-damage. Remove Pharah self-damage. Just remove self-damage, please. Reaper, honestly, is fine. Soldier, he's the only one I wouldn't reduce his damage by a whole lot, but I would say, his ult probably needs a little bit of a rework. But I don't know. I feel like it's honestly okay where it is. Sombra talked about already. Sombra making hack targets vulnerable or see through walls and require it. Only make it like a Discord. Make it so they're vulnerable. However, it needs to be timed well and it needs to be on a target that is diveable, for example. Symmetra, just less damage, and I don't know. I hate slows in the game. The slow is unfun, but it's understandable. I would reduce how much it slows you by, how much each turret, or I would make how much each turret slows you by the same. And I would make the maximum stack slow less. I would make it so it caps sooner. That would be my only change. Torb, make the turret fire rate less. And give it a range, so that way it's not the entire effing map from Hollywood, basically. Tracer, blink vertically and reduce damage. Widowmaker, reduce damage so she can't headshot, one-shot anymore, and make it so she pings a target or makes them visible through walls for like 2 seconds or something upon headshot only. Not upon body shot, but upon headshot. And then supports, if I had to change them, Mercy, less damage obviously, but I'd also make it so her heals is, I would say all healing just 2/3 of what it is, maybe just as a flat change. Make it so you don't heal as much. And I would heavily nerf AoE healing. Moira, I would change to, again, the orb. I would limit the number of bounces it has. I would, because that's the only unfun portion. Like, Moira's orbs are fine if I dodge them and it disappears, or it bounces once. Like, that's fine to me. It's when it bounces 17 times across the map, and just because it lasted 10 seconds or 8 seconds or whatever it is, it managed to find me in a corner at 3 HP while I'm waiting on a health pack to regen because my teammate took it. That's the part that's annoying and unfun. I would say damage buff on Mercy may be reduced to 25%. And again, Resurrect on Mercy, I would make it either instantly res the target in spawn, or I would make it res at half HP with the other half being self-damage so she doesn't get ult charge off of it. Her ult's fine as well. Moira, I mean, I just feel like Moira overall is just a hero that shouldn't be meta ever. But at the same time, if you make all healers just healer, then, or supports just be, healer as a role, like, she's okay as is. Lucio speed, the same. Healing, just damage and healing just halved. And I don't know. I feel like he's in a good spot. He does too much damage, and it encourages Reddit Lucio plays too much. I feel like if there was something that encouraged more of a team play kind of mechanic, it would be better. But in a duelist era of 5v5, I think having him do what he does the same. The inherent issue is boop, and the inherent issue is environmental kills. Environmental kills is just dumb when you have a support who can get a 4K off of just booping everyone a ridiculous amount of distance. So, Orb and Discord on Zen stay the same. I would give him a light movement buff, I think, maybe. And I would reduce his damage by a lot. Brig, I would remove one of her abilities. I don't know which ability. She's one of the ones like Sombra or Bastion. I would rework Sigma and I would rework Brig 100%. And the reason is because she does too much. You just need to choose. You need to choose what she does. I think Whip Shot is crucial to her kit as an anti-dive. But I also think Stun is crucial to her kit. So I would probably remove one of her healing aspects and make her a low healer like no single target heals, let's say. If you removed the single target heals, that would be the only way I would see about balancing her at this point. That, or make it so she doesn't, or she can't boop targets. But then you remove her ranged ability, and she, as a support, you need to have range of some kind. Unless you make her like a Mercy character, where she has her melee as her only damage, but her mainstay is she has a permanent heal ability in AoE or something, like Lucio does. However, it's super low. And so if you have Lucio Brig heals, you only get like a total of 40 or 50 heals per second. I would say even less than that. A total of like 30 heals per second. So it's a death ball-y kind of composition. However, like for example, if you have Brig Lucio, you would be countered by Pharaoh. So then it would be Brig Lucio, probably like Reaper Mccree or Soldier Mccree, and then Reinhardt. And how would you counter that? And I would think Doomfist would be a good one. I would say snipers would be fairly good against that. And I feel like there would be counterplay to that in general. I don't know. I would either give her massive single target heals, or I would give her AoE. I don't want her having both. That's how I would change her. And I would either remove her shield, which is that's another thing. Just remove her shield and she would probably be a lot better. Or remove her whip shot. And I honestly think, I don't know. I think removing the whip shot would be fine if she had some other consistent source of healing. For Ana, heals damage halved, sleep dart, nade 80%, heal reduction maybe. It's the only thing I would change about her. Baptiste, I would make immortality do one of two things. It would either be a flat damage reduction, or it's an overcharge or overheal like kind of thing, where you throw it down and I take 300 points of damage as a 200 HP target. It puts me down to 40 health, and that 300 then gets minused by 160, leaves you at 140. That 140 damage, extra damage, goes to the Baptiste immortality field. So it acts like a Zarya bubble in a sense, where if everyone receives Nuke's Blast at one time, it absorbs all of that. But if you receive, enough poke damage, it absorbs that poke damage and makes it disappear even if you hide it behind a wall. That's the change I would make to Baptiste to make him more viable. And then there's tanks. And we'll just kind of quickly run through these. Reinhardt, all the changes, just less damage. So that way he's still viable. Canceling charge, double fire strikes. That all still good. Winston, the long range, it's honestly not enough unless all the damage gets reduced. And maybe give him 2 charges of leap. Sigma, I'd have to remove things from him. One of the things needs to go. Either you remove his, get rid of his shield, sure. Make him like Diva, where he either does damage or he absorbs the abilities. So he absorbs abilities, and I would make it, I don't know. I would remove shield. And I'd probably, I want to say remove rock, honestly. And then giving him something like a linear leap, like a vertical leap that defies gravity. That would be pretty interesting. And his survivability is his absorb ability. Sort of like D.Va's DM. And he would just basically become a different version of D.Va, where he doesn't have any stun, but he doesn't need micro missiles because he's just at 120 damage, which you'd have to nerf, so probably do like 90 damage. I would nerf micro missiles as well. And you would have to put the leap on a relatively low cooldown and make it super odd movement. So that way it's not a predictable movement. So it's sort of like a fast up, pause at air, fast down. Or maybe make it controlled so you can choose how long you're vertical. That would be how I would change Sigma. So he only has his absorb ability, and he's able to obtain high grounds, as well as move up and down fairly quickly. Orisa, I would get rid of her shield, and I would give her a charge ability. That'd be the easiest way I see of balancing her to making her more of a bruiser. And I think I would decrease her damage by a lot. And while I don't know, I would say if maybe when you fortify when you charge, you do like your slash damage like from the animation. That's the things that I was always thinking about. Like, well, how do we make it more like the cinematics as well? Because that's kind of the appeal. Like, if you give Reaper like grenade launchers, maybe it wouldn't work. But Tracer being able to blink vertically, that was in one of the animations. That would be awesome. Honestly, going back to the heroes, divas, like, I would make basically you're making every single tank an off tank, more or less. The only ones that are more still going to be main tanky is Winston and Reinhardt. And honestly, Winston will be relatively viable if you just decrease his damage less than you decrease the heals. Because right now one of the biggest counters to Winston is just AoE healing. So death ball compositions, you would have to go for the supports, but if they have Lucio Brig, like, what are you going to do? You got to switch. And the easiest way you counter that is you make a tank like Orisa. Like, make Orisa a Reinhardt killer. So if they play Reinhardt, you play Orisa, basically. And if you play Orisa, well, now you just play like Winston, dive over the Orisa, and take on the supports. Something like that. Some sort of counterplay. And even then, make it so that way Reinhardt... So yeah, I take back what I said. I'm sorry. If you make Orisa a Reinhardt killer, that's bad for the game. You want it to make it so Orisa can beat Reinhardt, but Reinhardt can beat Orisa. That's the entire point of lowering all the damage and lowering all the heals, is to make it on the individual player and his skill, whether or not he survives or dies in that situation. Roadhog, I would... The only change I'd probably make to Roadhog, besides decreasing his damage, is maybe make it so his take a breather does AoE damage reduction or AoE heals to his team. Or both. Zarya, I have a big change that I did from that Overwatch 2 demo. I'd give her 4 bubbles that give her 20 charge each. I would decrease the amount of time it takes for her to lose charge. And I would reduce the max damage by a lot. I would not want Zarya to be doing a lot of damage. Zarya doing a lot of damage is BS in my mind. Especially with the laser weapon. Wrecking Ball, I have no idea how I would change him. He's so weird. He's the one who benefits the most in my mind from 5v5. Only because he's always played like he was the only tank in the game. Like... There's no real change in my eyes from how he plays. I would leave Grapple as is. I would nerf his damage. I would nerf Pile Drive by a lot. And I would nerf his Adaptive Shields to give ult charge, so he's actually feeding when he does that. I think his ultimate, which is an area denial, it kind of goes against what like tanks are. Like, tanks are either area denial or CC. D.Va is area denial. Wrecking Ball is area denial. Sig is CC. Winston is more or less crowd control. Reinhardt CC, Zarya CC, Roadhog is both Aerial and CC in terms of he's knocking back people, and Orisa is just damage boost. So she's actually the most out of place tank ult. Maybe even make that her ultimate is her. She does. Wow, how would you make it so she like steadfasts into the ground or something? I don't know. I feel like the entire character of Orisa in terms of like the war and stuff from Overwatch lore is lots of damage. So damage or self-preservation charging kind of stuff. And yes, I know I don't have my Word doc up, in case that was a question. But yeah, that's every hero. That's every hero. I would go ahead and I would encourage anyone who wants to kind of discuss some of my opinions on this. Go ahead and let me know. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think that I'm correct or incorrect, or if there's something you would change about what I said, and maybe potential things I don't know about, like how would that affect high levels of play, how would that affect low levels of play, how would that affect just platinum level of play, things that people have encountered that they think that, oh, if he had that ability he'd be so broken, or if he had that he'd be useless, if he didn't have this shield he'd be so useless, no one would ever want to play him, things like that. But for now, I think that's where I'm going to leave it. Thank you all so much for joining me on this long talk. Join me tomorrow. I'm going to be continuing my normally scheduled programming of Darksiders. I'm getting close to the end, actually. We're already in the Dark Tower. So feel free to join me for that. Until then, thank you all so much for joining me. Until next time, stay safe and don't get lost in the abyss.